So let's get the European perspective on some of what you've heard from Jill about the earnings season. So it's the earnings season on Wall Street. We'll take a look at the earnings season also at the European markets, but we're going to start with the Dieselgate, diesel deception story. So let's get Ulrich Barths, who is a DWTV financial correspondent for Channels Television at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, the German DAX, there to talk to us this afternoon, intraday there in Europe. Ulrich, it's good to see you. Straight from the hip, is Fiat Chrysler the next Volkswagen?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't know. It could be because it's being looked at by the U.S. authorities, and $4.5 billion fine that's being waved into the cameras there, that would be a hefty price tag for Fiat Chrysler to have to pay. And I talked to an analyst this morning. He said that that company would have a much more difficult time paying that amount of money than Volkswagen is having to pay a much higher sum. Volkswagen, the sum in the United States at the moment adding up to about $20 billion, but it's a much more profitable company with lots of fine-earning premium brands pouring cash into the coffers. A different situation at Fiat Chrysler. But other people say Fiat Chrysler's case is not as serious as VW's, so the cost in the end, the bill presented at the end, won't be as serious. Interestingly, the stock crashed yesterday, but today it's making up some ground, at least about 3.5% to 5%.
Yes, so Ulrich, let's move it on. Of course, Fiat Chrysler is one of the stories we're looking at as far as corporate news and earnings concerned. So let's undress this a little bit and look at the earnings season in the US. Of course, we're looking at, but let's get a bit of a European perspective here. Look at the European earnings season for us. Give us some insight into what to expect across sectors and companies and your jurisdiction.
I can maybe give a few highlights. The European earnings season hasn't really begun yet. There have just been a few companies like Continental, for example, here in Germany, which have reported preliminary figures, making less profit but having a higher turnover. But the banking industry will be especially in the limelight. Why is that? Because of three very important countries. Britain, what will the Brexit have done with British banks in the meantime? Germany, the two largest banks here, which are also listed in the stock market, Deutsche Bank and Commerzbank, with a terrible 2016 behind them, and people very much looking to the last quarter for guidance on which direction they will be able to take in this year. Also in the limelight will be, I think, a number of mega mergers in a lot of sectors. Take, for example, the stock market merger, Deutsche Börse, the one operating the Frankfurt market where I'm standing here, and the LSE, and Bayer and Monsanto, and of course Praxair and Linde in the industrial gases sector. So people will be looking at their quarterly results to find out how well they're going into their merged situations.
Well, of course, thank you, Ulrich. But again, we all know that globally it's Wall Street that report earnings first. So what numbers and what companies investors or traders in Europe are interested in as far as Wall Street is concerned, with the earnings season kicking off little by little as we get to inauguration, and after that getting the full-blown 2016 numbers?
Fundamentally, the banks are pretty well in the number one position here in terms of interest. We just heard from our colleague on Wall Street that, it's not so much the fourth quarter results as the guidance, as the look ahead that's counting to investors. And I think the European investors are taking the same approach there. And when I talk to people here, they're almost envious of the position and the, let's say, the fundamental health of American banks vis-a-vis German banks or most European banks. They've just come through the crisis in such a better state. And we'll be hearing more on them just shortly, European time after 2 o'clock, and people will be having a big eye on that. oil stocks also in focus. The oil price has risen, as you well know, and people are expecting that to reflect in the fourth quarter results. And of course, there are also major European oil shares where that applies, also BP or Royal Dutch or Total in France.
Okay, we'll have a lot to chew in the next days and weeks for the month of January. Ulrich, thank you very much. As far as the earnings season is concerned, of course, we will be looking at some earnings from our own jurisdiction in the next couple of weeks. Thank you so much. Do have a great day, a great weekend, and thank you from Frankfurt, Ulrich Barths, DWTV4 Channels Television. Let's move on to the Asian market, where the Chinese shares slayed on Friday as investors digested China's underwhelming exports for December and disappointing full-year trade figures. The Shanghai Composite wavered for most of the session and closed down 0.22%, while the Shenzhen Composite was off 1.5%. In South Korea, the Kospi lost about 0.5%. The Nikkei 225 in Japan finished in the green about 1%. The Australia's ASX 200 down about 0.79%.